What's up, fungal associates? Welcome to Completely Arbortrary, the podcast about trees and other related topics. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Alex Crowson.
Great work, Alex. Really good work.
And along here with me...
less good work. Bring it back up. Bring it back up.
Casey Clapp.
Hi, everyone.
Casey, right before recording, I said, I got to rally.
Yeah.
I'm a little low energy today.
Yeah, and I offered to splash water in your face and also slap your face.
And I replied.
You said no for unknown reasons. Honestly, I'm a little upset. You didn't take me up on that.
Yeah, I mean, that does help sometimes.
Friends let other friends slap them.
Well, no. I disagree.
All right, fine.
But you had somebody you wanted to shout out.
I did. I want to shout out other Casey. You know who you are.
Wow.
I was over at the famous Fort George Brewing Company in Astoria, Oregon.
That's right.
And, I was hanging out over at the brewery, and I was ordering a beer, and then a lovely person behind the counter came back and was like, hey, I'm sorry, this is weird. I'm sorry. Do you have a podcast? And I was like, yeah. And it turns out that they're a listener, so we ended up just chatting, and then they gave me a free pint. Pint. So I was like, hey, you know what? Thanks so much. I didn't say I was going to give them a shout out, but I wrote it in the show notes saying we're going to shout out Casey.
And their name was Casey, the person who talked to you. Okay, well, shout out to Casey.
What's up, Casey? Thanks for the beer.
Thanks for the free beer.
Yeah. If anyone else wants to give me free beer, Alex does not drink, so send it to my house. Just send me a message, and maybe I'll come to your brewery sometime.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to give me like a free bass amp,
I'll shout you out. And I'll play it in somewhere.
Well, Casey, today we are talking about a very cool tree.
That is true, Alex.
Did you know also that this podcast is supported entirely by the lovely people who listen to it?
I did know that.
Yes, on arbortrarypod.supercast.com. It's ARBORTRARY pod.supercast.com. That is our support platform. We have a couple of different tiers there. You can join the first tier, which includes ad-free listening to the show, which includes bonus episodes, which includes the AMA feature.
That's right.
Get your question asked and answered on our show. But the tier above that is, of course, the Cone Club, which includes the live streams and a monthly premium cone sticker from a different species every month, from a different artist every month, sent to you in an envelope, guaranteed to be licked by Casey Clapp. You could not ask for more.
Yeah. And if you buy one of these T-shirts and you get some cones and that whets your appetite,
yes,
now's your opportunity, because you also get access to all of our cones, and you can go back into our hidden cone store and buy all the cones from all your favorite species. No matter where you are in the world, we have a cone from down the street.
That's right. Now, without further ado, we got to take a break, but when we get back, we'll talk about the Laurel Oak. That's right.
Yep. If you go by JJ and you live in Florida, this one's for you.
Wow, I can't wait to hear what that means. Right after the break, we'll be right back with Completely Arbortrary. Welcome back to Completely Arbortrary.
There wasn't even a break between the breaths, Alex.
There's going to be a hard cutoff edit on that.
That's going to be good.
Today we are talking Quercus laurifolia.
That's right, we are.
The Laurel Oak. I feel like I maybe could have guessed, if you had given me enough time, I could have guessed this scientific name.
Yeah, it's one of those that seems right. It's the Laurel Oak. Like if they said laurel leaf oak, then that would be a literal translation.
Sure, yeah.
Quercus laurifolia.
They just picked this one straight off the shelf.
They really did. Yeah, there was no creativity to it.
Well, let's imagine, as we do every episode. Well, let's imagine that we're in Georgia.
Let's do it. I love Georgia.
And you and I are walking along in a nice park, come across some laurel oak. Let's ID this tree.
Excellent. Anyways, you're walking through a park. And you see a tree. It is going to be a large tree that grows up. The first thing you'll notice is that it looks like a very standard, like run-of-the-mill oak tree. And I say that knowing that there's a lot of different kinds of oaks, but for the most part, oaks are very famous for growing in these big globular kind of ways where they have a single stem and then this nice big rounded globe-like canopy that's just popped right on top. So it just has this like, wow, well, that's a nice looking big round tree. That looks like an oak. Now, especially down in the southeastern United States, where there's like 40 species of oaks that are native just to that region. You have a huge diversity of oaks, and they all really do tend to have, if you let them grow in a wide open space, this big, beautiful circular canopy. And our laurel oak is exactly the same. Nothing special, nothing fancy about it. However, as you get closer, it starts to become a little bit less oak-like and starts to look, I don't know, honestly, a little more like a laurel, which is great for the name.
Yeah, totally.
So it grows about 70 feet tall, and it has about a 40-foot spread, so it's got that. You walk up closer, and the bark is not rough and ready. It doesn't have big, long fissures or plates or anything like that. It's really kind of just smooth bark that ends up kind of just getting a little bit cracked here and there.
It's very utility.
It is. It's really, truly utility
And
bark.
it's gray, too.
It's gray as ever. It doesn't like develop interesting textures. It's just kind of normal. It's just like, all right, hey, whatever. There you go. Fantastic.
I hate gray utility bark.
Really? You do?
Of course.
I guess I've known this about you, but
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard quite the disdain in your voice that I'm getting right now.
That's true.
Well, that's what it is. So, first check right there. Now you're seeing it.
Big red X.
So the one thing that I do like about the stem, though, is that it tends to develop a buttressed fluted base, which I do really like a lot. It's one of my favorite things about trees, especially that are like not the big tropical trees, because they do it really well. That's like, okay, a given.
Yeah.
But the trees that are growing in non-tropical places and they just have this like whoosh, it's great. I'm going to make a video. Maybe I'll do it this week. It's going to be the buttress-based trees of Congaree National Park.
Great.
And I'm going to put in the background, I like big butts, and I cannot lie. It's going to be good. I'm going to do a lot of those zooms, in the videos. Yeah. Alex gets it.
You have to put comedy on top of it because the content is a fucking snooze fest.
No. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna put this out here just to prove you wrong. Anyway, so the other thing you'll notice as you get up,
sorry,
is literally this is what you do for a living. You're like, yeah, this content sucks. Well, Alex, as you get closer to this tree,
yes,
you'll notice that it is at least okay. I should say this: there are two different kinds of this tree. So I'll give you the standard version of what we're going to be looking at. The namesake of laurel oak. So it has one kind of leaf shape that looks very much like a laurel leaf. It has a lanceolate shape. It maybe gets about 5 inches long, and it doesn't have any significant lobes or points or anything along the smooth margin. Entire margin, no lobes. It's a little bit cupped. It's a little glossy on top. It's kind of a lightish medium green. Like nothing too fancy, but it's very much distinctly not oak as you would expect oak to be.
Totally. Can I just say so far?
You may.
This tree is boring.
Hey, I know. I'm sorry, Alex.
Impress me.
I should have picked something more exciting. Well, okay.
Is that what's so cool? Is this the 8th deadly sin? To be bored. To be boring.
Strict boring. Yeah. What's the the old Latin name for boring or something like that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. We'll think about it. Yeah. Well, let me throw some excitement in for you, Alex.
Hit me.
This is a tree that has two different kinds of leaf forms.
Okay.
There you go. See, okay, we got a little eyebrow raise there.
I'm perked up.
So the other leaf form, it's more rhomboid.
Rhomboid.
Yeah, where it kind of grows out and then will kind of become a little bit of a diamond shape and grow back in.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. And it can also grow like, instead of being like a diamond shape in a strict sense, it would have like maybe a lobe on one side or maybe two on one side, maybe one on the other, but like really not symmetrically and distinctly lobed. It's more like, oh, there's like kind of a lobe-ish right there.
Cool.
And so this is the thing though, is that these are two different leaf types, and these two different leaf types are on trees that grow in two different places. So some people are actually convinced, as a quick aside, that this is in fact two different species. Where one is rather they both grow in like lowland areas. Like you don't find them more than 500 feet elevation in this area, which to be clear, there's really not more than 500 feet elevation in this entire area to begin with. But as you go further inland and you hit some big hills, this tree doesn't grow. It likes to be on the well-drained like riverbeds or floodplains where there's not the greatest soil in the world, but there's like sandy soil, so water can just kind of go straight through. That's where you're going to find the one kind, the laurel-leafed laurel oak. And then the diamond-shaped one is what they actually would call the diamond leaf oak, and it likes to grow in just a little bit wetter conditions. Not necessarily where it gets flooded and stays flooded all year round, but just a little bit more moist, where you'd say, that one has more water on average than this site. You'll see these two different leaf shapes, potentially two different trees.
Is this similar to a few weeks ago, say a while ago, I think it was before we lived our life of STEM. We talked about a tree in Australia.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That had this kind of phenomenon where like the same species grew differently depending on where it was.
Yes, that was the snow gum, yeah.
Snow gum, yeah. Is this a similar phenomenon?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
And the reason I don't believe so is that historically, they said that this is a different species. They called it Quercus obtusa. But that has since been kind of disproven, where they're like, these are like exactly the same trees. There is just this environmental change that makes them grow a little bit different. Whereas the snow gum was so distinct that it actually was two different like subspecies.
It like subspeciated.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay,
so they can still interbreed, but they also like you take them out of their environments and they will still grow the same way. This, I think, if you had switched, you take an acorn from the the diamond leaf one, the obtusa.
Alleged.
Yeah, and you plant it over in the upland area.
Yeah.
I believe it would grow just the same as the laurel leaf.
Okay.
So they're mostly thinking it's more just the environment where they're growing.
Nurture.
Exactly. Yeah.
I had to say something.
Please.
You described your I like big buttresses.
And I cannot lie.
I called it a snooze fest.
Yes.
And I'm very sorry.
That's okay. Wow.
In reality, I'm very excited to see this video.
I hope so. It's going to be the one that makes me go viral.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed, everyone.
It's about damn time, as Lizzo would say.
As she would say. Well, the other funny thing is that this is there's another layer of lumping that's happened with this tree.
Lumping?
Yeah. Some people think that it is actually the same species or maybe a variety of Quercus hemisphaerica, which is very confusingly called the same thing, which is either the laurel oak, the sand laurel oak, or the Darlington oak.
Hemispherica.
Yeah, and it has very similar leaves to this, but apparently look a little bit different in terms of like one has a certain kind of lobe more often than not. The other one has flowers that grow like a couple weeks before the other. Like they're very, very similar, but have these like minute differences. And the Wikipedia page on one, I think, actually like kind of says, here's the differences between it. But some lumpers have called all these trees the same species, yet others have said, it's actually just a different tree entirely.
Okay.
So just wanted to make that last quick little aside point about what is this tree? Where does it come from? It looks just like 10,000 other oaks that grow in that area.
Totally. I mean, it looks like a million other oaks.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Very confusing, but very apt at the same time.
It's just just like the lighthouse. It looks like the template for an oak that you are then supposed to take and make your own.
I see. But then inevitably, you don't. You just use the template.
Yeah, you just turn in the template, and the teacher's like, wait, you didn't change this.
Yeah, this one grows in the sandy areas.
It's like, I'm making a comment on templates, teacher.
Wow. Very meta, baby.
Casey, can we talk about the acorn?
Yeah.
Because I think this acorn is just delightful.
It is. It truly is. It's adorable. So
it reminds me, if I had to like translate it to a humanoid,
yeah,
be like, that's like a hobbit of an acorn. It's
okay,
just this little rotund, kind of short, fuzzy, there's brown fuzz all over it, just like hobbits'
Yeah,
feet.
it kind of looks like it, doesn't it?
It's delightful. I love it.
Yeah, well, I also love it. And it is the same kind of acorn that you get from a bunch of these other kind of red oak family acorns. The pin oak is an example. It's tiny. Like it's a really teeny tiny acorn, and it's got these striations that go from the tip all the way up and out to where the cap is.
That's what I was trying to nail down. I was
Yeah.
like, what about it is so cool? And it's those like watermelon stripes.
Exactly. It looks like watermelon. That's perfect. That's exactly the right
wonderful.
description. Yeah, and they're just adorable. Pin oak I love to find because they have those same things. And a bunch of these other like willow oaks and the hemispherica, all these like very particular kind of red oak family acorns look exactly like that.
And
like they're just adorable.
Sorry. You said it's teeny tiny?
Yeah, it's not very big. It's very much, I think, like up to 3/4 of an inch. Like,
No kidding.
really not a giant nut. Like the ones we have out here, the bur oak, for instance, the overcup oak, like they can get like 1.5 inch big.
Totally.
But these are just teeny tiny little guys.
Cool.
Yeah, and then the cap is a little scaly cap, and it has it covers the nut about 1/3 of it, so it also makes it look even smaller because it's not more than 3/4 of an inch long, and then 1/3 of that is covered by a cap. So it looks like a little fuzzy thing that's warm and has this little cap on for wintertime. I just love it.
It's an adorable ratio. Casey, I would love to talk about the flower.
Well, I'm sure you would if it was even interesting, but it's not. It's just a catkin, and that's all it does. It's a catkin like all the rest of the oaks in the world, where it comes out and it does a job, and that's it.
Well, here's one thing that might be interesting too.
Okay.
I knew that this was a catkin.
And you still wanted to see it.
Well, I'm pointing out the fact that I can never keep like all of these types of flowers straight.
Oh,
like
yeah.
raceme and catkin and panicle.
Yeah.
Who fucking knows anymore?
It's all just mashed together at this point.
I'm a lumper.
Yeah. Oh, you're a flower lumper.
Those are just flowers.
Yeah, they're just flowers. Whatever. I don't care. All right.
That's what. From now on, anytime I don't know something about something, I'll be like, I'm a lumper.
Yeah, I'm a lumper.
It's all just deli meat.
I don't know. It's all just deli meat.
Capicola and salami.
Oh, that would be so good, Alex. Like, I'm a lumper. Whatever. Just give me the car. It's like, what? That's a semi truck.
Just like, just really lean into being an idiot.
I think it sounds great.
Yeah, why not? Own it.
Fully support.
Casey, we've talked about the catkin.
We have.
And I think that's all of our tree parts.
Yeah, that's all that I care to talk about.
All right.
End of episode.
After the break.
No.
That'd be amazing.
We can't just end it at that, Alex.
Yeah, so in my experience with this show, even the most basic template-esque trees have something interesting about them.
Yes.
And I think that's the beauty of trees.
I completely understand. I completely love that, Alex.
And I think that's the beauty of our podcast. Please nominate us for Webby.
Yeah, please. I think those are already done.
I know.
No, next year's Webby. Yeah, whatever.
So, Casey, what is so special about the laurel oak?
Well, that's kind of a bit of a loaded question because what we're talking about here is a conversation that we've had before, but this time we're gonna steer into it a little bit.
Interesting.
So we're talking about when good trees that don't appear to really have anything wrong with them, and they're not invasive, they're not bad for your health, they're not downers, they're not rude, they're not nasty, prickly, they don't insult your family, they don't talk shit about you, they don't do anything. They're like just normal ass fine trees.
Okay.
But they're just fine. And then when you put them in a certain situation, they become bad.
Oh, wow.
Bad trees.
You know what you do with them?
What do?
You bring them on Maury and send them to child boot camp.
Yeah, you do. Oh, and you give them a paternity test and see which little acorns are there.
Give the children a paternity test.
Oh, no.
I guess that's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, you got to figure that one out.
I yell at my mom, and I don't give a fuck.
Like, oh my God. Well, this is...
exploitation at its finest.
It is 100%, and that's what Americans are good at.
That's right.
So this tree is actually chosen for this because I was thinking about this idea of when good trees go bad. And a while ago, we got a message from one JJ, which is a longtime listener.
Oh, yes, JJ.
Yeah.
I know JJ.
And JJ had messaged us and said, I recently listened to Q&A Part 2, and I have to push back a little bit. Yeah, this is a long time ago. And said I got to push back a little bit about planting laurel oaks in Florida. So on this episode, someone asked for recommendations on which trees to plant where. And normally, I'm like, I really can't give you good advice because you need to know exactly what's going on there. And I think I gave all of those caveats and then just still said, yeah, plant this tree.
Yeah.
It was a tree that I have known from my time in North Carolina, from driving around through the South. Like, it's just kind of around, but it is a tree that JJ has worked with as an arborist, and is like, this tree sucks. Like, this is not a tree you should plant because of a bunch of different reasons. So, and essentially, these issues come down to the tree growing too fast.
Okay.
Having a very bad compartmentalization record.
Ooh.
So it just doesn't really handle decay or damage very well.
You nick it and it just dies.
Exactly. It immediately contracts some kind of disease. So it also is just not on top of all these things, or like maybe because of, it drops limbs and it like falls over. Like, there was a famous photo of it was a bunch of trees that were planted in a small planter strip. They had all knocked over in some big storm, and they were big trees, and it looks like they just peeled up the grass sod around them, and they were just laying over the sidewalk.
Oh my God.
And it was like, oh my God, like, it was this, big moment about a hurricane and all this kind of stuff. But they have a bunch of other issues, like with disease and everything. And then I was reading through while I said, okay, this is the perfect example to use for this idea of when good trees become bad trees.
Yeah.
So I started doing some more research on what exactly is going on with the laurel oak, because though JJ is a longtime listener, friend of the pod, you got to check your sources, man.
Whoa.
So I was like, okay, is this just this, is this a cones your own kind of situation? I got to check up and see what's going on. And it turns out not really. Because I'm reading through a bunch of different kind of sources that just kind of talk about this tree, and none of them like give a glowing recommendation. They're all like, oh yeah, you could definitely plant this tree. It's planted in, parks and strips and things like this, but here are some other good options. You know, maybe plant a bur oak or a Shumard oak. Yeah? No, you don't. You want to plant this one? Okay.
I have a perfect analogy for this.
What is it? Yeah.
People visit Portland and they're like, where should I go to eat? And somebody's like, ooh, you should go to Porcano.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, God.
Well,
you should go to
Another
Burgerville.
thing. Yeah. Well, I do like Porcano, though.
But
yeah, there are better. Yeah, good
there
mole
are
mole.
so many better.
Yeah, good mole.
Yeah.
And way cheaper. Oh, my God, way cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
It just kind of was a tree that everyone said, it's a tree that you can plant and it grows. But everyone comments that it has it grows really fast, and as soon as you have one nick, just like you say, it immediately will start to get decay in a column that'll go up and down the stem, and it gets really big really fast, and then just tips over or drops branches, things like that.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
Why is it growing really fast inherently a negative?
Well, it's usually not inherently a negative, and this is how I think that's the perfect question about what we mean by when a good tree goes bad. Because if you have
every time you say when a good tree goes bad, in my head I say tonight at 9.
I know, yeah, it absolutely is. I have the same thought. Like, we are making the local news story as we speak.
Yeah.
Well, so this tree so I do like this. Like, we're going to have like a really intense person standing out, like talking about it. Now, this tree behind me looks like a nice tree.
Sorry.
So this little guy, and any other tree that grows fast, in its native habitat, it is growing under certain circumstances with usually other trees growing around it, and it's doing whatever it has kind of evolved to do. So selection has said you are going to live more and produce more if you do these traits. Now, that's not exact way evolution works. I'm giving a very easy, flippant kind of description.
We know.
Thank you. So, this is a tree that grows fast, and it grows down in like these bottomland areas. So it tends to get a lot of water. So it is genetically programmed to just shoot up and grow really fast.
I see.
A la the alders and willows
Yes.
and cottonwoods.
It reminded me of a willow when you were describing all its negative points.
Totally. And that is kind of the thing where it's like, okay, well, these trees are all like, they're on that side of the ledger where they're like, ooh, those are not great trees to have around your house.
Yeah.
So in a city situation, people like trees that grow fast because we want to have this big, huge canopy immediately.
Sure.
So that is why we initially planted like the tree of heaven. It would grow up and have this big, beautiful canopy in like 15 years. And it was like, yeah, this is a great tree. Cool. And we now know, well, that's not so good.
We invited it into our home.
And then it just took over like Ivy and Jumanji, you know?
It just started feeding on everyone like a vampire. That's why you don't invite them in.
Exactly. Don't ever invite them in.
No.
So this is an issue of kind of living fast and dying young is what it comes down to.
Okay.
So
you're Chris Farley of trees.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah. You are any rock star that died at 27.
Yeah.
So the whole big problem with growing fast is that as soon as you start to shoot up, you are essentially prioritizing certain things in terms of your budget.
Sure.
Every tree, just like anything, has a budget of resources and energy. And it has to use those for certain things. Some trees take it as the hare of the famed rabbit and hare parable. Some will grow very slow, and they'll put on all the measures to make sure they have a strong wood, make sure they have a strong defense system, and that they're able to reproduce. They kind of do that slowly, though. They build themselves up a little bit slower because they don't put as much effort into just shooting straight up as fast as they can.
So is this like your giant sequoia? Do they grow really slow?
Giant sequoia, honestly, some trees just really shirk all these things, and giant sequoia is one of those.
That's why it's a perfect 10.
Exactly. It grows too fast. It grows really fast. It gets really big. It's decay resistant. Nothing hurts it.
And it lives really long.
It lives really long, and it also is drought tolerant. What the fuck?
Well, that's not fair.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
But with our tree, but this laurel oak, it grows really fast and doesn't put as much energy towards, say, defense.
Sure.
It doesn't put as much energy towards making really strong wood because it doesn't really usually need it. When it's growing out in the forest, it's got all the water it needs, so it can shoot up really fast like a cottonwood, and then it will take advantage of being higher and getting more energy, and it will put out more of its acorns. So it essentially does the rabbit rather than the hare.
Okay.
So it's
the hare rather than the tortoise.
Oh, jeez. Exactly.
Then you're going to have to explain the difference between rabbits and hares to me. Which...
Well, this one's got a larger ear and tends to be found in deserts. Yes, thank you. So it does the hare rather than the tortoise.
Yes.
And normally that's not so bad, but it makes it so that in its native habitat, just like cottonwoods and alders, they're great. They end up creating like a lot of niches, and they are those early succession trees that grow up really fast. And then if a flood comes and knocks them over, then they'll just regrow themselves again. That's what this tree does. That's what it's used to doing.
I think what's important to remember here is that a habitat is so much more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, totally. Alex.
Like a tree that grows really fast and then falls over at the slightest breeze, you might think, well, that tree is doing a pretty bad job at being a part of its habitat.
Yeah.
But once it falls over, maybe it falls into the bank of a river and provides a habitat for frogs or some shit. You know, like
you could name literally any animal, and you'd probably be like, yeah, totally.
Yeah, and maybe its nutrients leak into the water, and then the next year the salmon are really healthy or something. You know, like these things are so like interconnected and detailed.
I do want to hear your science podcast, Alex. Honestly, I put fertilizer into the water so that the salmon get bigger and stronger.
They all fucking died. What's up with that?
You're exactly right, though, in terms of this habitat idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes the trees that in their native habitats, they're great and they're doing a lot. But when you bring that good tree into the city, it becomes a bad tree.
Sure.
And along those same lines, if you grow really fast with trees next to you, you tend to get tall and skinny. And then you can fall over because you got decay somewhere, whatever. That makes you a bit more of a risk to have near, let's say, a house or a building or a car or a road.
A street, yeah.
A school bus full of children.
Yeah.
This is a situation where we wanted this tree to grow fast, and it's an oak tree. And god dang it, everyone is biased towards oaks.
It's true.
Everyone loves oak trees.
It's true.
So if you are planting a big, beautiful tree and it grows fast, it gets tall, it's got this nice big canopy, and it's an oak, oh yeah, oaks are good trees. Then you plant this oak tree. But this is the cottonwood of the oaks.
Totally.
It grows really fast, and then it doesn't care because trees don't give two shits about what's below them. So when their branches fall, they're like, great, I'm just going to keep on growing. I'm just going to rebuild my canopy. They will also in a forest situation grow in a certain form. Usually it's taller and skinnier because they're growing up, and there's other things around them that are also growing up.
Sure.
So if you don't have anything around, then you get this big, open, wide-spaced canopy. Some trees, like the bur oak, they're really good at doing that. They love to grow out. They're really strong wooded trees. They grow slower, and they get these big, wide canopies, and they're very good at holding themselves up. This oak is not good at doing that.
Yeah.
So it will just drop giant branches because it grows a little bit too fast to really put on the strength. It's not its priority. Its priority is other things. It doesn't care if it drops this thing. It's going to grow up, going to keep on reproducing. Decay is going to get in that broken branch union, and then the tree is going to fall over, and the tree doesn't give two shits. People, though, care a lot.
Of course. I mean, this kind of plays perfectly into your whole thing of like right tree for the right place and the right situation.
Exactly.
The right purpose or whatever.
Yeah. And
what do you say exactly?
I usually say right tree, right place, right objective.
Objective. Yeah.
So, but this is the kind of the funny thing. We might need to add one more onto that, Alex.
Wow.
Because it would be, I don't know, like right risk tolerance maybe? We'll have to maybe workshop it and come up with something. But essentially, if we stop at right objective, your objective is to have a tree that can grow in poor urban situations where the soil is not very well drained, it's compacted, and you may not have as much moisture. This tree can take those conditions.
Totally.
It is a pro at growing in those conditions. Okay, great. That's the right place and the right tree for this right place because we have this, urban lot that has been demolished and then flattened and compacted. Now you have a house on it. Okay. Then that is the right tree for the right place. It grows up big. It's got this nice big canopy, but that nice big canopy is potentially going to fall at any point. Or maybe that whole tree is going to tip over because it gets decay because it doesn't care too much if it gets decay. So then you have the right tree in the right place for the right objective. Let's say it's shading your house. This is also, I should note, a tardily deciduous tree most of the time. So it'll keep its leaves until very late in the wintertime or early spring.
Wow.
Drop them, and then as it's putting on its new flush.
Okay.
In the further north, it's more normally deciduous. In the more south, it's more tardily deciduous to almost be an evergreen.
Cool. Interesting.
So you could have great shade entire year with this lovely tree, but the next thing that we have to think about is like, okay, maybe this isn't the right tree for the right place because it has all these negative qualities that really start to come out when you put it in this urban situation, when you put it near everything else that we humans care about.
Yeah.
And the last thing to add on is also one of JJ's last points, where it just gets covered in diseases.
Yeah.
It's an oak tree. We know the oak trees are famous for having millions of caterpillars all over them all the time. It's what they do.
Epiphyte city, baby.
Epiphyte city, especially down in the south. You get all sorts of different epiphytes growing. So having...
Are animals and insects considered epiphytes?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think only really plants, because phyte means literally
of course.
Plant.
Yeah, okay.
So, but in this case, I think it's fair to say that, it's an epiphytic plant or an
epiphytic animal.
Yeah, I'll say epiphytic animal. Okay. You know what? Don't message us.
Or say something nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, that's a good. Yeah. Do message us, but just say, hey, I love that idea of. Anyway.
Sorry.
So this is it's susceptible, just like all the other oaks, to having these other diseases and things come in. But in its natural habitat, who cares? Like if it gets a bunch of caterpillars or it gets different. Aphids. Another example of a tree that could be like really good in one place but not so good in the other is the tulip tree. Tulip tree is famous. Lindens also famous for having like so many aphids in different scale, like sucking insects.
Yes.
That they just rain down honeydew in the summertime, and everyone hates it.
You're saying tulip?
Yes, tulip.
Okay.
Yeah. Liriodendron tulipifera.
That's
the
right.
Tulip poplar or yellow poplar.
Okay, yeah.
So that is another situation where it's like, okay, in the natural native forest, half the time that doesn't even reach you because there's other trees around that kind of intercept the honeydew. And otherwise, who cares? It just hits the ground and an ant comes by and eats it, or a million other things. Like it's just it's not an issue. It's only an issue when you take it out of that native habitat and put it into a situation where you don't want your car to be covered in honeydew, or you want to sit outside and watch the timbers play, and you can't do it because there's this giant tree above you that is just raining down, and you're like, it's the middle of August. Why am I getting wet right now? I hate this tree.
For example. You know what, Casey, this is like, the tree is saying, like, take me as I am.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, great. Yeah, of course. I love you.
And then it moves in.
And it starts leaving its dishes everywhere. And you're like, oh my fucking God.
It hasn't shaved in weeks.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, you said you would take me as I am.
Yeah. And then you start growing too big. You start leaving branches over here. It starts to smell bad. There's decay over here. It's the worst. And this is what I think has happened. And this is what I think this tree kind of exemplifies, is this idea that in a certain situation, cottonwoods and Liriodendron tulipifera, alders, and this oak tree in particular, the laurel oak, as well as plenty of other tree species that we can't even like really talk about because everyone kind of knows it when they know it. There's 1,000 trees in Portland I could start saying, oh, this tree, I love this tree in this situation. Over in this situation, I hate it.
Right.
This is, I think, that kind of thing where it's a good tree in every sense of the word in its native habitat. You look at it and say, oh, it's beautiful, it's growing really nicely. It fell over and now it's making habitat and it's fertilizing the fish or however the shit that works. And then you bring it into the city, and it is like, it's like you said, but I also imagine it like a really rough and tumble kind of character that then gets brought into the city and like is bumbling around and like breaks china because it does not have all
the graces of a city tree.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that is what I think of this tree.
It's like Pretty Woman.
yeah, totally. So I think that's the case, and I love that that JJ messaged us and said, actually, from this personal experience, I can tell you this tree sucks.
Yeah.
I've only seen it in like forests and maybe in a park where it looked beautiful, and then I went back to Oregon and never thought twice.
I think there's something to be said. Shout out to JJ, by the way. JJ, when we're doing the video game live streams, JJ was an all-timer. He was there every single fucking time.
It's the best.
Giving his opinion on games. Definitely can talk shop in terms of video games. So shout out JJ. So I think there's something to be said in this whole thing for so my mother taught elementary school, mostly kindergarten, first grade, for like 30 years.
Wow. She
was a born teacher. She was so good at it, a legend in the school that she worked at until she passed away. And had students coming back, and this now I'm just gushing.
Keep going.
Had students come back who were like in college.
Oh yeah,
and were like visited her every week.
Amazing.
She had a line of students out the door at the end of every day that wanted to say hi to her.
Yeah,
that weren't even in her class, right?
Insane.
So. She always talked about when I was originally going to education college, I originally was going to school to study education.
No. I was going to education school.
Some people just call it school. She would be like, I studied at school. Mm-hmm. I did a TA, teacher's assistant job and I did classroom studies. But nothing prepared me for that first day of class when it was just me and 25 kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, it knocks you on your ass, no matter how well studied you are and how good you think you're going to be. Mm-hmm. I think there's really something to be said in almost probably every field of like, wait until you see it in practice.
Yeah.
Like you can have all these ideas.
It can look good on paper.
Yep. But if you do it and it's like, doesn't work, that's sort of trumps everything, right?
Yeah, once you actually see it in action, and then I think about this a lot with cultivars, where it's a tree that is not designed, but like they've picked out all the ones that are going to grow a very certain way.
Yeah.
Usually it's upright, so it grows over the top of whatever, planted in the streets. I'm always dubious because I'm like, if the tree doesn't like naturally grow that way, then it's probably not sustainable.
Sure.
And you're probably going to end up having 50 years later all these trees with this particular problem.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you mean. I think that's a perfect description.
There
Like,
you go.
born pro like your mom, but I bet you she had that same moment when she first was in front of 25 kids, being like, oh, whew, okay.
Yes.
How do I do this? You
Yeah.
go home the next day and you're just like, oh my God. And then slowly but surely you get better. Like people can adjust to it, but I don't think trees are necessarily good at adjusting in that same sense. Some are. They can take the conditions and they can grow way differently.
Sure.
But others, I think you're hitting it on where you're just like, oh, that tree, not good.
Yeah.
Not doing well. And it's not going to adjust itself to become a better tree for this urban, rough, awful, terrible environment.
And unfortunately, yeah, the city is like the worst place for a tree to
It's
be, right?
so hard. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's the worst place for most things to be. but
That's
it's
true,
here we are.
Casey. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, Laurel Oak, sorry.
We haven't given the review yet, Alex, so we can't apologize now.
And our condolences to JJ.
Yeah, for working as an arborist, and he says all he does is he said 90% of the trees that they cut down for the municipality that had already either fallen or dropped a huge bunch of limbs was this species.
Bummer.
Yeah. Now, assuming that JJ can identify the trees correctly,
Oh my gosh.
we know they're so similar.
Are we making a beef?
Yeah,
Let's start a beef.
Let's start a beef.
It's been a
anyway,
while.
we just talk so lovely about JJ. They'd be like, and you know what? But I usually don't even trust that you can identify trees correctly. You suck. Not a chance.
Well, that was our discussion of the Laurel Oak. We hope you enjoyed it. And maybe don't plant this tree. We'll see in our review.
We'll see if we can make a recommendation for planting this tree.
But we must do so after a break. We'll be right back with Completely Arbortrary. Welcome back to Completely Arbortrary. That was our discussion of the Laurel Oak. It's time for our review of this tree.
Yeah, it is.
And here's how it works. We're going to give some final thoughts on it and then give it a rating of 0 to 10 golden cones of honor. Casey, as our resident expert, we'll begin with you.
Thank you, Alex. I initially really liked this tree. I think it's a nice tree. I think it looks good, and it is an appropriate tree in certain situations.
Okay.
None of those, I have now determined, are in and around an urban area. I think they should be. I think these are the trees that, of a few others that we've talked about, I think they should just be left alone. Let them grow out wherever they're going to grow and let them do their thing, because that's just, they do it really well out there and everyone loves them. So let them just do it.
Sure.
Now, I also have had this thought about kind of oak exceptionalism, maybe recently.
Okay.
So it's as a quick aside to kind of explain what I mean. In Oregon, in Portland specifically, we have a nuisance species list, and that is a list of trees that are essentially invasive, is the best way to describe it.
Okay.
Now, who decides they're invasive? It's this one little group of people in this one department, and they're kind of ecologists, they're kind of not. They will look and say, okay, are we finding this tree seeding itself in and growing itself in a way that is not controlled, I guess. And they added on a tree called the European horse chestnut. You're familiar.
Yes.
And that tree, they added onto the list a couple of years ago because it was found growing and seeding itself in Forest Park, our little forested area, and in the west side kind of hills. So it was starting to grow and just create its own, essentially create its own population. That would make it invasive. So they said, now this tree is going to be considered an invasive tree. It is an incredible street tree. It's beautiful. It's really tough. It does everything you could ever want. Now, because it has this designation, it's much easier to cut it down. That's a problem, and I hate that. Now, there are two species of oaks, the pin oak and the northern red oak, that do the same thing. They grow all over the place, and they're at my mom's house, just south of town. There's a birch tree that we used to have that ripped itself in half. It's now a snag. Then there is an oak tree that's in my neighbor's yard. I have found hundreds of seedlings from both of those trees throughout the yard. I have one planted as a little bonsai tree, and bonsai is really using the term graciously. It's at my house right now. I love that tree. I've had it for years. That little guy is a seedling from this other northern red oak. The birch tree is listed as a nuisance tree in the city of Portland. The oak tree is not. A bunch of other trees are listed as nuisance species that grow and seed themselves in at least as much as the pin oak does over on the west side of Portland as well.
When did you become an investigative journalist?
Oh, well.
It feels like Spotlight all of a sudden.
I can't tell you that. Yeah, we got a lot of nice news things here, don't we? We should do an entire series. Trees that Casey finds in the news. So this is, it's a situation where I'm like, well, why is this? And everyone loves oaks, and so they have this exceptionalism. Oaks are ne'er do wrong, you know?
Yes.
And so I think that we need to just nip that in the bud. Now, instead of saying those other two oaks are invasive, because you know my feelings on this in the city, I think we should just take off the invasive list for a couple other species. So I'm not arguing add pin oak and red oak onto it. That would be the most destructive thing we could possibly do in this city.
Okay.
However, I think for our tree, we should leave it alone, leave it out there, and get rid of oak exceptionalism and say this oak, though it is an oak, is not a very good oak.
Yeah.
And I'm going to agree outright with JJ, who gave it 4 Golden Cones of Honor when he emailed us years ago. I am going to say 4.5 Golden Cones of Honor because I do still remember seeing these trees and learning about them when I was in North Carolina, and I thought it was kind of nice.
Okay.
And I'm going to give it 0.5 for in its native habitat, doing what I also think cottonwoods are good at doing, which is falling over and becoming habitat. I'm going to give it another 0.5 for that. So mine is going to be 4.5 Golden Cones of Honor for the Laurel oak. So I'm sorry, some oaks ain't good oaks.
Yeah, I agree with you, Casey. I think this is like barely an oak.
Ooh, wow.
It's almost like...
It's more of a laurel than an oak.
Yeah, but I also think it's more of like you said, more of like a cottonwood or more of a willow than an oak.
Which also, we should note, is great that oaks can just take over, so many different niches. Right?
Sure. I mean, but it's so not what I think of when I think of an oak.
Yeah. What do you think of when you think of an oak?
Big Oregon white oak.
You
know, big chunky boy out in the middle of the field, just providing shade and storied. And I mean that in a couple of different ways. It's very tall, but it's also very old.
Yeah.
This I look at, I'm like, nah, you're not an oak.
Wow.
I don't get that vibe from you.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a vibe, right?
It's an interloper, I think. Have you seen the film? We've been talking a lot about movies this episode.
This has been a movie-heavy one.
Have you seen the film Midnight Cowboy?
No, I haven't.
Well, this cowboy, this guy from Texas, young chap, he wants to move to the big city, New York City, and become a gigolo.
What?
Yeah. He wants to go get into sex work in New York City.
Is this real?
Yes. It's a great film. Hey, I'm walking here.
Oh,
That's from this movie.
I heard that was actually a taxi that legitimately drove onto set.
That is the story.
Amazing.
And Dustin Hoffman did not break character. But he goes to the big city, and boy, does the big city just beat the shit out of him. He cannot handle it.
Poor guy.
And he is, not privy to the ways of the city folk, and he makes a fool out of himself, and he doesn't, he can't find work or a place to live, and he just cannot do it. That's how I feel about the Laurel Oak.
Gotcha.
Leave it in the country. Let it go thrive where it belongs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And you know what? There are other ways. You don't need to sell yourself.
Yes, well, and do what you want with your body.
Do what you want with your body. And it chooses to just let it decay whenever it happens.
It makes for a good movie, though.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
I'm not a fan, Case.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it.
Even among oaks, the only oaky thing about it that I really like is the acorn.
The acorns are really nice.
The acorn is great even for other oaks.
Yes, which should be noted.
Yes. So I'm going to go... Man, I was going to say I want to go right down the middle, but I don't. I want to go a little less. So I think I'm right there with you.
Really?
4.5 Golden
Exactly
Cones of Honor.
4.5.
Yeah,
That's an average of 4.5.
That's right.
Incredible.
Well, I think it's an average of 4.5.5.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you're right.
Or something like that.
Now that we're doing the math,
used to do double decibels.
What do you mean used to do?
That was our review of the Laurel Oak. Casey.
Alex Crowson.
It's time for my favorite time of the day.
Oh!
It's the completely arbitrary...
Lunchtime. Oh.
Sandwiches.
Dang it.
It's time for our completely arbitrary AMA. We've got a really fun one this week. Hey, if you want to ask a question on the podcast or have a chance at having your question be on the podcast, I should say, join up on Completely Arbitrary Treemium at arbitrarypod.supercast.com.
It's the best place to be.
It's the best place to be. It's the best place to support this podcast that you love so much. You keep the lights on. We love all of our supporters. And this week, we have a very cool question from Nerd in Space.
Ooh.
And they sign it sincerely, Nerd in Space, and Nerd in Space is hyphenated.
Nerd in Space.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I think we should pronounce it Nerd in Space.
Like Toys R Us.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Nerd in Space. Here's the question. Hi, Casey and Alex.
Hi, Nerd in Space.
If you were in charge of selecting trees to go on a spaceship, what would you prioritize? I'm thinking the multi-generation colony ships where the Arboretum also functions as air processing and food supply.
Okay.
And these plants will be planted on the new planet that ship is going to.
Okay.
Well, I'm really being marketed to here. I love this question. So, Casey, before we started recording, I was like, hey, we should do this question. I really like it. And then I said, it kind of reminds me of like canoe crops.
Yes. Yeah.
Which are the cream of the crop, so to speak, plants that the Polynesian people brought to neighboring islands such as Hawaii.
Whenever they would go exploring, these are the ones that they would bring from their native land before they left. Yeah.
And the idea being these will help us start a new not civilization.
Well, just survive wherever they go. If
Yeah.
you go to a new island that doesn't have, this particular medicinal plant, then we're going to bring it with us so that we can just plant it and grow it there. We don't need to depend on it being there.
Right. Or this plant that's really good to build things out
Yes.
of. Or perfect for whittling our tools or whatever. So this is sort of the, 2001 Space Odyssey version of that.
Of canoe crops.
Yes.
Okay. I love that. That's a perfect way to frame it, I think.
So Casey, what do you think? Well, I'll just say off the bat, we're gonna need a food on the way. So something that grows kind of fast and can feed us.
Yeah.
And then food once we're there, of course.
So we need also, it needs to be small. We can't grow a giant tree in space.
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna say right off the bat, I know it requires a lot of water. But I'm gonna say almond.
Almond, okay, yeah.
Because almonds are full of good fiber and fats.
Yes.
I mean, a handful of almonds will keep you sustained for a couple hours.
Very true.
So that's going to be one of my picks.
Okay, so I think first, how much time do we have? Let's do a quick little logistics here.
Oh boy.
I think we need to have 3 different biomes, and the reason I say that is that some if we decide
a water level and a snow level.
Yes, exactly. This is
and
just
a desert level.
We need to have let's say we have a big spaceship that is big enough for a lot of stuff.
Okay.
So you walk into a certain level, and that certain level is maybe, I don't know, a quarter acre. It's really big. It's a football field size, giant space. And you have all the trees growing there. But those are the trees that are semi-temperate kind of thing.
Sure.
Just between temperate and subtropical.
Okay.
That would be your almonds that are really producing great. Central California. Then you have another level. You go down the elevator, and the level below that is the more tropical level, where it's not quite like blazing heat, but you got enough that you are mid-level tropics. Then you go down a little bit further, and it's straight tropical, baby.
Okay.
And that's where things are growing really fast. That's where you get your stuff that will be we eat all the time. Your bananas and your mangoes and all that stuff. They don't grow in anywhere less than tropical.
That's a good point, because tropical plants also grow really fast.
Yes.
So if we're looking to, get things going ASAP.
Yeah. So all these other things, we can kind of do that. But if we can split it into those three kind of biomes.
That works for me.
The top one, I think, is where you're getting that kind of stuff you're talking about. Your almonds, I think.
Olives
would be really good to have.
Then you could use those for, olives are great because you could eat them fresh.
Yeah.
I suppose.
I think so.
You pickle them, like we have. They store really well.
Yeah.
And you can press them for oil, which you can use for cooking and fuel.
Yes, and they also both grow in like deserty areas, so you can keep those for a lot. I think it would also be good in this section to have a couple really hard kind of even oak trees, some kind of oak that can grow like maybe the other things. I'm thinking of like Mediterranean and like Californian oaks that can take really dry conditions, so you don't need to use as much water, but they still grow really well and can create a nice hard wood to make things out of.
Totally.
I think that would be very helpful.
What kind of oak would that be?
Let's go the Suber. It's going to be the cork oak. I think that'd be great.
Oh, sure.
Also get cork.
Yes.
Multi-use kind of tree.
To store food. You can put corks in bottles.
I think that would be a really good one to have.
Wow,
and
good synergy.
Yeah, right. And this is also, I think everything can kind of grow this way. It's looking really good. And I would throw in a couple more fruit trees that are there, just because like a peach would be really nice to have, and maybe some cherries just to add some sugar and some flavor.
Great.
Because that's what your brain works on, these kinds of things.
Wonderful.
In the soil, of course, we'd also have mushrooms growing and
yes.
potatoes, to be clear. I know those aren't technically trees, but...
And like one of those self-sifting cat boxes, we can like harvest those from the floor below it.
So good. That'd be
bins.
awesome.
So a level down.
Yeah, that would be like the subtropical level.
Subtropical. So we're talking, like like Costa Rica, like Mexico, Costa Rica.
Yeah. I'd say I'd say Mexico range. Okay. So you're like very southern Italy. So you get your lemons and citrus and pistachios and things like that. That's probably what I would start to aim for. And then honestly, I would probably get a bunch of I would have to go to different cultures and ask what kind of plants do you use in this subtropical region? I'm thinking India right off the bat, where their food is essentially intermixed with like Ayurveda, and their idea of medicine as food is way more culturally strong there than it is in the West.
How about we do sort of a mashup of all, like we have R&D, right? Go out and they do a ton of research on traditional medicines from all around the world.
Yeah.
And they kind of create the perfect traditional medicine for a space voyage.
Yes, exactly.
And we kind of form a lot of our decisions around that.
So whatever we have is growing to produce something that's really good.
Yes.
Like neem would be another thing to grow, because then you can use that oil for other things.
Totally. And no single purpose plants.
Exactly.
No, like we eat this and throw the rest away. It's like we eat this and we press it into an oil, and we grind it up into, and we dry it and grind it up into a powder to use for inflammation or whatever.
That'd be 100% it. Exactly right.
Okay.
Then as you go down even one level deeper,
the equator tropics.
Exactly. That's when you're getting all the different fruits that you could ever want. As many different nut trees in all of these levels as we can possibly get, so that we are getting as much protein as we could ever need. And we're getting all the oils and lipids and fats and things that are really helpful. So like the, what's a big tree? The Brazil nut tree that grows down there. Chocolate, I think, would be a really good tree to have.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's got lots of different properties. Coffee, if we're going to round that up to tree, which might as well, then we can have all these different things growing together and producing all of the really intense stuff that we could ever need. The leaves, I think, are going to be really important. So like lime trees for the leaves and... anything else that grows in the top area, maybe the conifers, we could have a couple in that range, so we can get the vitamin C and things like that that we could ever need. So that's right. That's the level I think we're at.
Wow, that sounds great. I think we've done actually a really good job. That was way more well thought out than I thought it might be.
Nice.
Do you think we should have a level that's like pastoral for grazing animals, or by that time do you think we'll have vegan lab meat that is so convincing?
Yeah, that's very true. I think we should, because I think it's honestly, I just don't believe in lab meat. I think it's a
crime against God.
I think it's a crime against God. Yeah, that's fair.
Plus we can get wool from the sheep and leather from the cows if we need to.
Yeah, I think that would be the right idea. Essentially, like an old style farm that just runs in a big circle. So you have the chickens eat these things, but then also it's kind of a biome, so there's not going to be like all the other things there. So I don't know that we'd really be able to do a good job with that.
It might be too artificial to be worth it.
Exactly, yeah. But I think so, yeah. At least anything. We should have the farm section where we're growing all the tomatoes and zucchinis and all of the little tiny crops that anyone could ever need.
Totally.
But that would be, yeah. We can also hopefully grow it within the other realms. So it'd be like, here's your big trees, but then we also have lights underneath that help give all the things on the ground level a little bit of food.
Wonderful.
I think it's a great choice. That's what I would do.
Casey, only one more level.
Ooh, what do we got?
Our acre of marijuana.
Well, we
Gotta
got
keep
a
the people
long
happy.
trip, baby.
Yeah. What else are you gonna do?
Hey, there's nothing else. You got to do it.
Our recreation level, which is marijuana and barley and hops.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is where we have all the fun. 100%, Alex. It's going to be a long trip. We're not going to do it without a little bit of marijuana.
Can't do it. So what are we naming this ship, Casey?
Let's name it
The something, right?
The something? Okay. I would say let's name it the Pauly Shore's Biodome.
Let's do it. Why not? Thank you, Nerd in Space, for your question. What a fun one. And as I said, if you've got a question for the podcast, support the podcast on arbitrarypod.supercast.com. It's called Completely Arbitrary Treemium. Well, Casey.
Hey, that's a short one.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
I think I can edit out 20 or so minutes of Lighthouse and Kill Bill talk.
What? No.
Fine, I'll leave it in.
All right.
Hey, everybody. We're back from our foray into a very STEMful life. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. And we'll be back next week with a new one. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Completely Arbitrary. We'll see you next time. Goodbye. Completely Arbitrary is produced by Alex Crowson and Casey Clapp. Our artwork is by Jillian Barthold, and our music is by Aves and the Mini Vandals. If you want to support this podcast and become a Treemium member, head over to arbitrarypod.supercast.com. Thanks for listening.